The police discovered a secret tunnel inside a KFC restaurant in Arizona. That was no longer in use. HSI agent Scott Brown was informed that the fast food chain was doing illegal things. Over time, people noticed that lights were turning on inside the closed KFC building at night. This led to speculation that the building might be reopening or undergoing renovations. When Officer John Irwin was given permission to search the building, he found a small hole in the wall. This hole led to a tunnel that was 3 feet wide and 5 feet tall. They went through the tunnel and realized it went underneath the border of Mexico and into Mexico. While they were going through the tunnel, they heard someone walking and realized there were other people with them. They were in a Mexican home and hiding under a bed. A person holding a suitcase showed up, and the ICE officers quickly gathered around and took him into custody. This guy's name is Ivan Lopez. He was stopped by the police for a regular traffic violation in the past, and they discovered he was carrying illegal drugs. After looking more into it, they found out that Lopez bought the old KFC building for $390,000 in cash. The reason for the tunnel was to bring illegal things worth about $1 million from Mexico to the United States. But how did they manage to escape without being caught? Officials think that because the tunnel was small, the people involved in the illegal trade would go down through a hidden door in the Mexican house and walk the 600-yard tunnel until they reached directly beneath the old KFC building. Then, they would put the illegal substances inside, and they would pull them out with a rope through the small hole in the restaurant's wall. However, this tunnel is not the first one like it in Arizona. Tunnels take a lot of time to build, but there have been more of them lately because border security has gotten stricter, according to HSI Special Agent Scott Brown. However, the tunnel coming out from the empty fast food restaurant is still an important addition to the many instances along the border. This is mainly because it appears to be used for smuggling large amounts of illegal drugs. We all have a dream of buying our perfect house that we will keep forever. However, one man ended up getting more than he expected when he bought his. As he walked on his new land, Christopher found something that changed his life. Surprised and confused, he looked into the strange discovery more closely. He didn't realize that once he entered the scary tunnel, he couldn't go back to his old life. He kept investigating, even though a real estate agent and a police officer told him not to. Christopher finished his research and had all the evidence he needed. He realized that he had to leave his house and never return. But what did he discover that was so scary? That he had to give up the house he always wanted. Christopher Wanless recently purchased the property. The place was on a big piece of land with lots of trees and fields. He was really happy because he had a lot of space all for himself. He didn't know that he would find a surprising portal in a large area. But, as if destiny made him, he did it. One day, Christopher decided to explore his new dream home and the area nearby. The weather was really tough and it damaged the trees by removing their outer parts. But this actually made them look even prettier. Christopher admired the new scenery while listening to the sounds of birds singing in different patterns. The quietness of the woods and the birds singing blended perfectly together. Without realizing it, his feet started to move, and his body and mind were acting automatically. But then, Christopher noticed something. As he was still recovering from being confused, he kept going towards the strange thing that he had seen. It was very dark and a bit small, but it seemed like it was trying to hide. He thought that it could be just a different tree, one that is older, smaller, and darker. But as he came nearer, he instantly realized that he was completely mistaken. He was really excited and scared. So he wasn't paying attention to where he was walking. Christopher tripped and fell from a height of 3 feet. He was shocked by his fall and ended up covered in dirt and leaves. He brushed off his body and stared straight ahead. He saw the mystery from far away. But is it possible? He was very confused. He found an old and empty mine on his own land. He needed to look more carefully. What might be in this amazing building? The mine's exterior was covered in moss-like stuff. But it was too dark to see what was inside. Christopher remembers the time when they purchased the house. And no one had informed them about the mines on the property. We unexpectedly found the gold mine one day. And that was the end of it. When I first saw it, I was very happy. To the point that I nearly tripped. All I could think of was Indiana Jones and underground trains. Feeling very happy about his upcoming adventure. He quickly went back home and got a flashlight. So he could see all the things that he would discover during the mystery. He didn't realize that this would be the worst choice he ever made. He got to the mine's entrance with the flashlight and held his breath. He walked into the mine and saw shiny things stuck on the walls. What did he just discover? The old walls were wet and looked like they were going to collapse on him. He heard his footsteps sound loudly. And he couldn't stop thinking about the heavy soil above him. He brought a flashlight and 3 extra batteries to make sure. He could stay there for a long time. As he got closer to the walls, he saw something shiny but couldn't figure out what it was among the stones. He remembered joking with himself. Imagine if this was gold. But he quickly forgot about it when he saw something that could ruin his journey. No matter how hot or cold it was outside. The air inside the mine was wet and chilly. He quickly saw that his foot had left a deep mark in the ground. Water was coming in from somewhere as it looked like the puddles were moving. There is no evidence of things staying the same for too long yet. He let out a breath of relief. He understood that this was a positive indication. Because when water in old mines that hasn't moved for a while gets disturbed, it can let out harmful gases. He believed that it's best if the water keeps moving, so it doesn't become bad. But when he looked in front of him, using his flashlight to shine straight ahead, he couldn't see the end of the tunnel. There was something or someone present. Loud sounds began to bounce off the walls of the tunnel, sounding like they were coming from behind him. Curious, he went after the sound. He didn't know it was a big mistake. As he walked further, there was no light, no breeze, and no warmth. He extended his flashlight like a sword and seemed prepared for a fight. The loud noise got even louder this time, with sounds of machines and old metal parts being used. But then he listens to them. Who knows what he just entered? People are talking in the mine. But Christopher cannot hear them. Who is there? He calls out. But he only hears his own voice echoing back. He felt very brave. He needed to figure out who was present. There was water and dirt all around him. As he took each step, his boots sank deeper into the ground. A yellow air system was put in. But it was coming apart. There were chains hanging low. Not very far from each other. They were getting rusty and covered in mold at the same time. Christopher started to feel weird. And there was a strange feeling in the mine. Something was stopping him from going forward. As if he wasn't welcome to explore that place. Christopher remembers feeling the temperature getting colder. And sensing a strong feeling of something bad coming up ahead in the tunnel. He is following the water's path to find where it comes from. He hopes to discover who the voices belong to there. Was there a person living in there? Christopher was really far inside the tunnel. About 150 feet. He looked back and saw the light shining from the entrance. But when he looked back, he couldn't understand what he was looking at. He didn't move for about 2 seconds until his body responded. He jumped and was surprised when his nails scraped the walls. His claustrophobia making him feel trapped like inside a box. One of the chains was swinging heavily. Not just a little bit. No, with power. There was a person observing him. His heart pounded in his chest as he ran quickly towards the entrance. He needed to leave that place and he needed to make a phone call. But who was it? He felt desperate and sweaty as he hurried back to his house. Christopher hurriedly grabbed his phone and called the person who helps him buy and sell houses. When we asked about the place, we were informed that the estate had many mining sites. Christopher said, there were many mines in these hills in the past. And now there are many small mines scattered around the hills. Then he kept telling them about what he had discovered on the walls. There was a shiny material that made the small and deep tunnel appear bright. An agent informed him that someone was coming to see the secret mine soon. Christopher felt very relieved after ending the phone call. His muscles started to loosen. But all of a sudden his entire body became tight once more. He yelled out in disbelief as Christopher stood in his kitchen. After ending the phone conversation, the lights started turning on and off quickly. He felt very scared and tried to hide his panic inside him while breathing fast. The lights were blinking on and off in his kitchen, making it look like snapshots from a strobe light. But then all of a sudden, everything became black. He walked clumsily towards the switch in his kitchen and started moving it up and down. No words. That's when he began to feel cold. A chilly wind blew on his face, taking away his nervous warmth quicker than he could get it back. He quickly picked up the flashlight he had used in the mine. And luckily, it was still in his pocket. He switched it on and aimed it towards the thermostat. He could see that the temperature had dropped a lot. So when he breathed out, his breath looked like a cloudy mist. Christopher found it unusual or odd. But he was determined to restore his electricity. So he went to a circuit breaker. Definitely a fuse had stopped working or something had occurred. As he shined the light towards the breaker, everything looked fine. Everything was in its proper place. And the main fuse did not appear to be damaged. As Christopher kept looking inside the box and trying different switches to see if it would suddenly start working, he felt very relieved when it actually did. He believed there was a problem with the electrical wiring. But he still couldn't get rid of the feeling of being nervous in his whole body. He went upstairs again to get a drink of water and relax. But right after he pressed it, someone rang his doorbell. What might it be now? Mr. Rudolph met Christopher and started to tell him that the real estate agency reached out to him because of something Christopher found on his land. He was really happy to see what he found and even more curious to know what the material on the walls was. Christopher took Rudolph to the mine and told him to be careful, because he fell over when he first went near it. As the two men walked quietly in the woods, the sky appeared dull and gray, as if getting ready for a storm. But when they arrived at the mine, they took out their flashlights. The walls inside the mine were shining really brightly. As Rudolph got closer, the light reflected off the walls was dazzling and almost blinding. He is very happy and cannot control his excitement anymore. But as he looks at Christopher, there is something in that mine that is trying to communicate with him. Rudolph felt emotional and scared. And he told Christopher something that made him feel both good and bad about what was happening. Rudolph, with scary eyes, started to tell Christopher that the mine was actually a gold mine, which surprised him. It seemed like it was used for mining gold a long time ago. As he looked at the walls, he could see that the gold was still there inside the rock. This meant that the miners hadn't completed their work and had left the mine. But why? Rudolph explained that people in the area had been talking a lot about miners and mines from many years ago. But he didn't know of any particular gold mines in the area. The only thing that made him curious was why no one had taken the gold. Something really bad. Christopher wanted to find out the truth. As he gathered the bravery to explore the mine more, two thoughts filled his head. There might be gold, but it might also be haunted. He grabbed his flashlight and extra batteries and entered the place. As he walked away from the entrance, it got darker and darker. The previous time he went inside the mine, he was only able to go as far as 150 feet. This time, he understood that no matter what, he had to finish it. He could only find the answers he wanted after this. As the brightness of the light decreased, he continued moving forward. After going 600 feet inside, he finally figured out where the water was coming from. But suddenly, he noticed a door. He bit his lip, and it gave him a shivery feeling that felt like an electric shock. Then, water landed on his face and made his vision blurry. He moved his legs closer together and took a deep breath. Before he knocked on the door, he expected that no one would answer. Then he turned the handle. But what he saw made him stop. He had entered a separate and distinct world. No matter what the weather was like outside, it was very cold inside. He touched the wall. It felt rougher and colder than the walls outside. He felt really scared in that small place and wanted to leave. But then he saw something shiny from the flashlight. It was furniture. A bunch of useless things were gathered together and destroyed. But it didn't make any sense. Who would leave without their things? The air became heavier. Christopher felt a lot of pressure on his chest. Something strange was happening in that place. But he still didn't understand what was happening. He finds a bed spring among the junk. The thing was ripped and old and responded to Christopher's question. A person used to live there and, based on how things looked, they were in a rush to leave that location. But why? Christopher thought about this idea more when he noticed something else, a secret hiding place made of bricks. Who would want a secret place behind a door in a mine? Someone who wants to hide something valuable. Of course. Curious, he approaches the mysterious hole but is sad when he sees that there is nothing inside. Just as he was about to turn around and leave, he notices something on the wall inside the building made of bricks. A type of writing by hand. He shines his flashlight on the hideout and looks closely at different white scratches on the walls. He didn't know what it was until he got closer. He could clearly see that the walls had been scratched in 4 vertical lines at a time. He found it strange and also noticed some scratches while he touched them. The marks were likely made by someone's fingers. The scratches were not very deep, but they still left a visible mark on the cement. Who and what wanted to leave this place so badly? But as he thought about that question, he saw something else that would disturb and bother him forever. On the wall on the other side, he discovered more marks. But this time, instead of lines, there was a written message. He had to write down a message that couldn't be understood. He grabbed his camera and snapped a photo. Perhaps he might save that picture on his computer and look into it more closely to figure out its meaning. He got scared when he heard a sound. His body hair stood up straight and made him feel a shivery sensation. There was somebody present. He shined his flashlight towards the sound. But there was nothing there. He looked back and kept reading the words on the wall. But suddenly, he heard the sound of metal hitting each other. A chilly wind blew by him and he felt very cold. Like he had just taken a freezing shower and all his warm feelings and thoughts disappeared. At first, it seemed like it came from the back of him. Then it came from the front. The noise and cold were getting closer and louder from every direction, becoming more frantic. In just a short amount of time, he sprinted, feeling scared, and his blood felt very cold. As he ran fast, he couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong. He wanted to stay still, but his body pulled him towards the entrance. Like a moth is attracted to a flame. When he finally escaped, he grabbed his chest and collapsed onto the floor. He should have realized that everything seemed perfect. But it was actually completely wrong. A gold mine that seemed really amazing, but was probably not real. As he quickly stood up, he calmed down and kept running through the forest towards his house. The quietness of the air made it seem like even the sound of his footsteps was being taken away. Even the trees didn't move or make any sound, as if they were very nervous about what was going to happen next. He ran very fast because he had never run like that before. He needed to figure out what was really going on. When he reached his house, he went directly to his study and locked the door. Something strange was happening in that mine, and he wanted to find out why. He felt scared and looked up scary mines online. As he waited for the search results, he suddenly felt a cold sensation down his back, causing him to shiver. The object that was in the mine was with him inside the house, and he could sense its presence. He turned quickly, and heard people whispering quietly from all directions. Was he losing his mind? He heard a rough and loud breath coming from behind him. So he looked back. The quiet talking stopped. The air became cold, and his heavy breathing was the only thing that could be heard. Suddenly, the Google search appeared and the top result said, "If you want to stop the strange things happening in the mine and in your life, you have to confront it." Could he actually do that? Could he go back and make whatever this is go away? The only way to find out was to try. Christopher heard knocking sounds 3 times. And each time there were 2 knocks together. He forced himself to gulp down the feeling in his throat, and managed to say, "Hello," with a lot of effort. He cautiously took a few steps forward. He grabbed the handle to his study and turned it, hoping it would open quickly and smoothly. As he walked into the kitchen, a quiet buzzing noise caught his attention. It was produced by the camera. He walked over and grabbed the thing. He thought he had turned it off when he entered the house. But when he went to see the pictures, they were all gone from the memory card. Someone had erased them. He took his camera and went to the mine again. This time, he was going to encounter whatever was inside. Christopher mustered all his bravery as he stared into the mine. At first, it was really dark and unwelcoming for him. But then, he realized he had made a huge mistake. The long and dim hallway that he had escaped from 2 times before appeared even darker. He believed his flashlight wasn't working well, so he kept walking slowly through the water on the ground. Suddenly, a very cold burst of air hit him so hard that it felt like a basketball hitting his face. The chilly air made him look pale, even though his blood was still warm. But then he heard the sound of metal again. He understood he had to confront it. But he never thought this choice would turn out to be a really bad error. As he walked through the dark tunnel, he suddenly stopped because there was a very loud noise that hurt his ears. The loud noise made by the metal had become like a strong windstorm, made out of metal objects, constantly bumping into each other and making a really bad sound. Christopher was holding his head in his hands for a very long time. All of a sudden, everything came to a halt. The noise became quiet, and he lifted his gaze. Fear overwhelmed him, making him feel more quiet than the noise around him. And that's when he noticed it. The chains hanging from the ceiling of the rock tunnel began to swing, in a steady and coordinated way, almost as if they were dancing. He was so amazed by what he saw that he couldn't even hear the sound of the water. As he looked more carefully, he saw a big wave of water coming at him. "I think I'm losing my mind," Christopher thought, as the tense silence from earlier was filled with the sound of flowing water. His head hurt a lot, and his whole body was asking for air. He took a moment to get himself together, and started running towards the bright light at the entrance. Now he was confused about what to do next. He didn't have the courage to confront whatever was inside there. As Christopher ran out of the mine thinking he was safe, he turned around and looked confused. He couldn't find any water at all. Not even small pools near the entrance. He noticed that he was walking quickly, but there was nothing else he could see. He started going back home. He realized he needed to contact someone who could assist him with the strange things happening to him, because he couldn't continue living in that way. He walked through the extremely dark forest until he got close enough to see the lights on in his kitchen. Did he forget to turn them off? There might have been someone present. He unlocked the door. But when he entered his home, it seemed very empty and lonely. Nobody had been there. He probably forgot to turn off the lights earlier. He was moving around in his kitchen, unable to stop thinking about what happened earlier that day. Did everything really happen? He wondered as he quietly sat on his chair in his study and turned on his computer. Was he actually going to do this? He had never believed in ghosts or strange happenings. But everything that occurred that day, he couldn't understand. He opened his internet search tool again and started to type. The computer made a really loud noise and then it suddenly turned off. Like it died. He couldn't believe his eyes when he saw the dark screen. Christopher thought, what else bad can happen now? While tears started to fall from his eyes. He didn't know that his adventure wasn't over yet. Christopher was exhausted in both his mind and body. That day had exhausted him completely. He put his hands on his face and felt a slight tug. Suddenly, something yanked on his feet. He saw it and felt drawn to it. Like a magnet pulling in metal. He fell backwards after losing his balance. That's when he decided to leave quickly and call for assistance. Certainly. There must be an explanation for all of this. He learned that many strange cases were caused by harmful gases or stagnant water in the mine, which he hadn't realized before. Whatever it was, it had to be something. This sentence means that there was something important or significant that happened, although the specific details are unknown. He got into his car and drove to the closest cafe. He ordered a strong coffee and quickly opened his phone's search engine, fearing it might also stop working. He wrote in the search box, "Best ghost hunter near me." He was surprised to find 2 different places that were close by and met his criteria. He got into his car and reached the place Google Maps guided him to. In front of him was a purple sign that said, "Tarot Readings." He still couldn't believe everything that happened that day. But he couldn't sleep well without knowing what he was really dealing with. When the door made a sound like a chime, he quickly smelled incense. A lady wearing red and purple clothes approached Christopher and extended her hand to him. Then, she quickly began saying something that she recognized. Christopher recognized the sound because he had heard it before in the mine. However, this time the noise had a nicer and more pleasant melody to it. He woke up and quickly went to his car. Christopher went to his mother's house that evening and right away decided to sell his own home. The people responsible for the estate tried to contact him, but Christopher never responded. Instead, his mother was selling the property for him and was willing to consider offers from anyone who wanted to buy it.